All right, friends. Hello and welcome to another video. Today, I am joined by Mr. Jerry Gray from Jerry's Take on China. He is in Zhongshan in Guangdong. I'm in Dongguan, also in Guangdong. And today we're going to be talking about the perfect storm that China finds itself in the middle of. And we are going to discuss the origins of this storm and, well, the consequence of this storm as well. So let's start first by asking you, friends, to please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe this video. Jerry's channel is going to be listed in the description after we finish this show. And start by saying hello to Jerry. Jerry, how are you tonight?
Hi, good. Very, very hot. It's been 33 degrees and incredibly humid here today. I actually put the air conditioning on and it's the last week of November. Who'd have believed that?
It's the same here.
Well, you're only on the other side of the river. It's been a busy day today with, I've had a lot of media attention and we've talked a lot and it's been busy. Been talking about these organic protests, should we call them that?
Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. We're going to talk about that, the nature of this protest that we're seeing around. So, friends, make sure to leave comments, ask us your questions. We're going to just tackle this because I know that Jerry is very busy. He's got other things to do later tonight. So we are very welcome in my channel to have him here tonight. So, Jerry, let's start addressing the fact that the West always claims that Chinese people are oppressed and Chinese people have no right to protest. And then you are hit with this imagery of protests in China. So what's the truth about it? What is the fact about this?
Okay, so certainly the right of violent protest is not allowed in China whatsoever. But Nuri Vitachi did a very, very good tweet the other day where he cited Tsinghua University, so reliable information that says they're just short of, I think it's 490, just short of 500 protests in mainland China every single day. Every day. So this is not a weekly or a monthly thing. 500 protests a day are in China, and I've seen loads of them. You would have seen them yourself. If you're traveling around the city and you go past the whatever they call the town hall, your government building number 1, government building number 2, and you'll see there's a group of people outside, and the police will be there, and it's usually just a little bit of and nothing more than a few raised voices. And I've never seen it get angry. I've seen it. I cycle around Zhongshan a lot, and I see this kind of thing literally all the time. So for me, that's this idea that Chinese can't protest. A, it's wrong, and B, it's very, very misinforming because they do, and they protest all the time. So we know that that part is not true. So I think that answers that question. The idea that protests don't take place is not at all true. The idea of violent protests don't take place. They're very, very rare in China. And that's why I have my suspicions and my doubts about what's going on now.
I would like to add on to this particular aspect of protests. People are very vocal about the things that don't solve the problems in their lives, the things that gives them grievances and nuances. And that's why they have, for example, the 12345 hotline. So they are in contact with the government, letting them know and giving them feedback about what works and what doesn't work, what they want changed and what they don't want changed. And if there's something that is neck breaking here in China, is the speed of reform. And that's in response to the feedback that they get from people. But sometimes, well, the channels of communication are not the best, and that's when you end up with protests. There are protests all the time. You remember that there was a protest in Zhengzhou not long ago. We're not talking about the Foxconn one. We're going to talk about the Foxconn a little bit later. But this one about the people who had investment in a small rural bank, and those people played with their money. Imagine one of these cryptocurrency clashes and collapses, but at a way smaller scale. That took place in Zhengzhou. Exactly. And they went to the bank and they protested, and the police said, like, okay, you can protest, but not violently, blah, blah, blah. And all they were trying is get the attention of government to the issues that they're having. So protests do take place here in China quite normally. I remember back when I came here, I actually we went on strike in our university because they were not handling our visas and paperwork adequately. After a month, they were not done. And yes, this is something that takes place quite often here in China. So don't be fooled by people telling you that it's not possible to protest, or that Chinese people are oppressed by the government in terms of expressing their
Mm.
grievances and their issues with the way that they are managed. Um,
Yeah.
I wanted to go into another question, Jerry. So we are seeing a few protests around the country. Namely, we had in order, right? We had the Foxconn one in Zhengzhou. We had the Urumqi one. Now we're having some in Guangzhou, and now we are also having these ones in Shanghai. How can we differentiate these three?
Very
Sorry,
easy.
these four.
Actually, there's five. There's the one going on in Chengdu as well.
Oh,
Um, and the basically what we have here, there are two genuine protests going on right now inside of China. One of them is an industrial relations issue, which is it's basically a genuine industrial relations problem, and it was related to lack of COVID care rather than too much COVID care. And it's Foxconn. Foxconn have failed to pay some of the bonuses that they said they were going to pay. They failed to protect some of the people who stayed in the closed loop by adding people from outside the closed loop into there. And then the other one is very, very much a genuine case, and probably, in my view anyway, should lead to a criminal inquiry, if not at least a criminal charge at some stage, an investigation, because it appears that people were locked in their house. And if that is true, that is illegal, and it certainly is not part of what the government suggests that should be done. So that would lead to, I suspect, criminal charges sometime in the future. Both of these cases are being investigated as we speak, and both of them will be resolved, and they will be resolved, in my experience of China, in a proper way. So I think we can probably put those two things aside and say these are not they're nothing. They're very special in that they're quite violent protests inside of China, but they're not something that you wouldn't expect when events such as that occur anywhere in the world. People are disgruntled about a certain thing, and those people have now gone on to the streets to protest, which actually, just as I saw you had a video out before, just proves that Xinjiang is a lie. The narrative of Xinjiang is a lie, because as soon as people did protest, there are many, many pictures of it and many videos of it from different angles, different videos, but they can't get a picture of the genocide camps. So that tells me an awful lot about that particular story. But those two
yeah.
things are different from what's going on in Guangzhou, Chengdu, and in Shanghai. To a lesser extent in Beijing. There are some smaller pockets in Beijing. And should we go on to why I think those three cities are particularly affected?
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about that in particular. But I wanted to mention one small thing
Yeah.
before moving on very briefly. Is that when they are protesting China, Western media likes to immediately go to, oh, this is anti-government. This is against the CCP. This is, well, they call it CCP, CPC. But the truth of the matter is, people need to dig deep and realize that there are different reasons. Foxconn was laboral, basically. It's just there's a dispute with the employer. There are
Mm.
disputes that are of different natures, somewhere against COVID measures, but they're not directed, they're not asking for regime change, or for government changes. That's
No.
an important thing. So yeah, let's move on to the next part. Why do you think these ones are special?
Okay, I see similarities between other events that have taken place in other countries. The Solomon Islands a couple of years ago, Myanmar, Thailand, a whole range of different countries. I see similar things. And of course, what happened in Hong Kong in 2019, I am seeing similarities. And we can go through a list of the similarities and let other people draw their own conclusions. I'm not saying this is an infiltration or color revolution or anything like that. All I'm saying is I'm seeing similarities. So maybe the people here have been trained by, maybe they've been encouraged or influenced or even paid by, I don't know, or maybe they're just copycats. So I'm not saying this is the case, but if you think about these three cities, until 2 years ago, there was an American consulate in Chengdu. There is one in Shanghai and there is one in Guangzhou. Now, the American consulate, we know for a fact, if there's an American consulate, they could easily be a color revolution. And these things it looks like this thing has been sitting fully set up, fully trained, ready to go, waiting for the catalyst. What's the catalyst? And that's why we've called this the perfect storm. Foxconn, Urumqi, COVID lockdowns in several different cities, all at the same time. This is the perfect storm. Now, what do? You activate your sleeper cells. This is conspiratorial, it's hypothetical, but if I was going to be organizing a color revolution, I'd have people, paid people, ideological people, all the different people who have problems with the country that I'm working in, and I'd say, here's the code. The code is, let's get some A4 paper for the weekend. And that appears to be what's happened. This is now called the A4 paper protest because everyone's coming out with their A4 sheets of paper from their homes. Now, how did that happen spontaneously in 3 different cities and have all 3 of those cities talking about the same thing all at the same time when none of this is allowable on Chinese social media? How did that happen?
That's a very, very important fact that you bring out there, because the coordination that we are seeing in all these different protests around these different cities, not so many. There's no protest in my city. There's no protest in your city. There's no protest anywhere that we move around or from a lot of the people that we know. But
actually, can I just give you a list? Sorry,
sure.
I want to just interrupt and give you a list here. My wife is currently in Foshan. That's to the west of Guangzhou. You're in Dongguan. I was speaking to a friend in Shenzhen last night. I'm in Zhongshan. I was speaking to someone else in Zhuhai, and I've got friends in Shunde, which is also Foshan, but different part of Foshan. I've talked to them all. They don't even know that there are protests going on in China. So what does that tell us? My wife, when I talked to her this morning, said, I'm really busy today. I'm going to be doing this, this, and this. She said, oh, what about? And I said, the protest. She said, what protests? She didn't even know. And she's asked around, and her cousin has found one video to show her, oh, look, there's this thing going on. But she thinks it's just Guangzhou. Now, I haven't talked to my wife in depth about it, but that tells you that this is not widespread, because we are in cities that represent, those cities I've just listed represent 100 million people, 10% of the population of China. And there is one street in Guangzhou that has protests. So having put that into perspective, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Please carry on with your thought.
No, I mean, let's continue with this idea of putting things into perspective. Okay, the Western media is really salivating at every single opportunity that they see an event unfolding, a protest of any kind unfolding here in China. I just want to give you a comparison. There are in America 14 cities that have a population more than 1 million. In China, there are 116. 116 cities with more than 1 million people. So when you talk about 1,000 people protesting in a city of 25 million, you need to start really understanding, okay, is that representative of the whole nation? Because all you hear in mainstream media and some of these Western anti-China pundits, oh, it's time, it's happening, this time is real. Let me give you another little bit of information. There is one city in America, New York City, with more than 5 million people. And there are more than 20 in China that have more than 5 million inhabitants. And obviously, we're talking about Shanghai with 20. We're talking about Guangzhou. Shanghai's 25, Guangzhou 20. These are minuscule protests that are zoomed in and stretched so that you think that this is a massive thing that is going to change the government, that is going to change China, that is going to change zero COVID policy. It
I've,
isn't. It isn't
I've
like
also
that at
noticed some
all.
clever editing there where I've seen this on international media where they're looking at a protest from the front, and then you see the
Mhm.
same protest from a different angle, making it look like there's more, but there's actually only the same number of people. And in fact, I saw one where, and I don't know where it was, I've seen so many, but it was an English lady. I don't think it was BBC, but an English lady interviewing some, and some of them spoke English quite well too, some protesters, and they zoomed out to show a massive police presence, which is quite scary, to be quite honest. And then they zoomed back in. So they panned out to show the police and then zoomed back in to show her surrounded by about 20 people. And there didn't appear to be anything very large going on around her, except that probably many of them were interested. What are they filming? What are they doing? But yeah, sure, there were people protesting there. I saw Alex from Reportify come in. I think that's the right way to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
that. He said he's in Chongqing. 32 million people live in Chongqing, the largest municipality in the world. 32 million people, and he says it's dead quiet there too. So we were talking about huge numbers of people who are not protesting. And I saw someone called MS come up and say this is because people were upset that she got a third term. I'll be quite honest, I haven't heard a single person
Yeah.
in China that I know say that. Not one. But I think MS says he's in China. There, you need to come out a little bit. I think MS says he's in China, so it's possible that they have a different group of friends to me. My experience is limited to just a few thousand people, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get back a little bit to what we were talking about, the fact that this coordination that has taken place with this protest in different cities at the same time, the same slogans, the same MO, if we could say, right? We had in Hong Kong the umbrella, and then now we have the A4 paper kind of slogan or MO, right? This is not allowed. This type of coordination is not allowed in Chinese social media. So this didn't happen on Weibo. This didn't happen on Weixin. What do we know about what social media was used to coordinate? And maybe we can show some examples.
Yeah, the only thing that I've been able to find is, because you've got to be in these groups, I think, but the only thing I can find is copies of tweets that show things like Telegram page, which I think you're going to show now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw one which said, if these people are not protesting with us, we should burn their houses down. That sounded very Hong Kongish. And then we're seeing this is a call out to a group of different. There's BBC's Ed Lawrence,
Journalist.
the guy who we'll talk about later. Dake Kang, who is a Xinjiang, I would call him a Xinjiang agitator. He used to do translations for the Uyghurs from Uyghur language into American, I guess. Yeah, this is a call out. That was a call out to people to attend, to see things. Now, who organizes a spontaneous, organic protest and sends messages out by telegram to contacts in BBC, CNN, and those kinds of places? Who does that?
And why is it important?
Well, certainly it's not people who are protesting organically about the COVID restrictions. That's not what's happening here. That's not. We're witnessing an attempt at a color revolution here. That's my view.
There's also the type of messaging that is being shared, right?
Yeah.
This is very reminiscent of Hong Kong 2019.
Beijing.
Shanghai FCCP.
Just a second, go back. Who calls Beijing Beiping? That top line, Beijing, Beiping. Who calls it Beiping? There's only the Taiwanese do that. Taipei, Taiping. It's not Beiping. It never has been.
Well, a lot of people also argue that maybe there's a lot of efforts to distract from what took place in Taiwan with the elections. So there's a bit of a loss of face, and that might be an effect. Let's distract a little bit from what took place and the changes that are taking place in the island and what it signifies for the future of
Mm.
the One China policy and the peaceful reunification that Xi Jinping wants. I also wanted to address then this point that you were discussing with me in preparation. Telegram is not used in China. I mean,
I
people might
haven't got a
use.
single friend who uses it. Not one. Not one.
I don't know anybody who uses it.
I have
People
friends
might
who
use.
use WhatsApp, but not many. We
Hmm.
use WeChat all the time, but you can't talk about protests and demonstrations or riots or burning people's houses down on WeChat without getting yourself suspended and probably a knock on the door and asked to drink tea with the local police. So I think Telegram is an encrypted system that you do need, and you can't use it on a Huawei phone because it's the sanctions have banned it from Huawei, and that means that these are people who have access to external VPNs and the like. Now, I've made the comment many times that VPNs are quite common. But I know that the people I know, the normal people in China, they use VPNs to access Facebook. They use it to access Twitter, YouTube, those kinds of things. Telegram is
Hmm.
not common. And it's, to me, this seems very strange. Telegram groups, which include media organizations and individuals within media organizations being used to organize this kind of event, tells me that we are witnessing an attempt at a color revolution right now in China.
Yeah, let's call it what it is. Telegram is used because it is encrypted,
Yeah.
and that's it. That's one of the
Yeah.
main reasons why they're using this. All right, we're coming to 21 minutes, and I know that you're very busy, so let's address the last part of today's video, guys. Remember to like, comment, share this video, and subscribe to Jerry's channel. Subscribe to my channel if you're coming from Jerry's channel, please. That will really help us with the work that we're doing. We're covering this day by day, different influencers, different people with different messages. So thank you very much for your support. But let's address very briefly Ed Lawrence. Let's show well some of the things that took place, and what is your take on these things? First, I'm going to show you this photo from the Express. Yeah, and we can comment on it. It says BBC World journalist arrested in Shanghai amid major protests over COVID lockdown rules. My first comment is major. I mean, a city of 25 million people and a couple hundred people, that ain't exactly
Honestly,
major.
even if there was 2,000 people out in that street, that's still not a major protest for a 25 million. You wouldn't call 2,000 people protesting in London a major, and I've
Mm-hmm.
seen protests in London. I would suggest that I mean, this is to me, this is amazing. They have isolated the only foreigner and arrested the only foreigner there. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they know something. I don't know what they know. It seems to me to be very strange. And my comment about this is, first of all, the BBC released something where it said he was kicked and he was beaten, and then he was released after 5 hours, I think. So there's the one. Yeah, he was kicked and he was beaten. So there's been no explanation or an apology. But the police have told this. This makes me laugh. The police have said that they arrested him for his own good in case he caught COVID from the crowd. And they say, we do not consider this a credible explanation. And I agree. That's not a credible explanation. All I can say is, I do
That's a
hope.
snarky explanation.
Yeah. I think they've called up the police and said, oh, no, we didn't want him to catch COVID. No. And they've slammed the phone down. Honestly, I cannot see this being anything other than sarcasm from some smart police officer, if a police officer did say that. Now, here's what I say. As a former police officer, if he was kicked and beaten, and I certainly hope he wasn't, I think probably a scuffle whilst being arrested, whilst you're resisting this thing, and it's normal to resist. Don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing Ed for this. If 3 police officers suddenly come to you, you're going to go, wait, hey, what's going on? And that is normal. That's a normal reaction to this. They would then subdue him, which it appears they did. I didn't see it as particularly disturbing. Nobody was hitting him with a stick. Nobody was kicking him from the side. 3 people put him down on the ground. They cuffed him, or I'm not sure if it was cuffs or a clip.
Yeah.
But they restrained him, and then they walked him away. And they walked him away without any hitting or anything. There's a shot where he clearly says he calls over to his shoulder to his team, I guess, call the consulate now, which is good advice. And then he was taken away. Now, from that, we don't know any more than that. If he was kicked and beaten, I promise you, police officers are going to lose their job. Guarantee it. You don't kick and beat BBC journalists and get away with it. That's one thing. I guarantee that's going to happen. The other thing is, go on.
No, I did see the video, and in the video, what they're trying to do is he's got his arms behind his back, and someone is pulling the arms up so that his face goes down, but he's resisting. So somebody is either hitting him or pushing his head down so that he can actually turn and they can cuff him. That's what I saw. Did it look like a beating? No, more like put your head down.
Well, there's an expression that the police use in the UK, and this is very pertinent. People need to understand this. When you are arresting someone, you use the minimum force necessary. That's the wording, minimum force necessary. Now, very, very, very rarely, the minimum force necessary is lethal force. You kill someone. That's the minimum force necessary. If someone's running at you, slashing a knife around, and they've already killed a couple of people, and they're coming for you, and you shoot them, and they're dead, that's the minimum force necessary to stop something further from happening. But if somebody is just simply, quite normally, quite legitimately, I think, resisting arrest, and you know, this is the thing, as a former police officer, the number of times I've arrested people, it's you know that people react differently. Some of them go, hey, get off, and then you've got to restrain them. Some of them just say, oh, okay, and put their hands behind the back, and no problem. Now, it's quite normal for someone, and Ed's probably done this. He's, what are you doing? Get off me. And they've had to bring his arms down, and then they've turned him around. That's necessary minimum force if it's required. Now, it could be that they were over the top, but believe me, there's enough video evidence of it there. If they are over the top, he has the right to make official complaints. He will do that anyway, and they will be investigated by the police. The police here are not enforcer police. They're really usually very friendly people. So I think that will be dealt with at a different level. And I hope anyway, that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in their daily press briefing will cover this and tell us exactly what they think happened, what the police report says happened. And the video will probably back it up. That's the way I view that particular one. So
yeah, here in China, when police have the body cams, they actually do work. Not like when the police go to see Paul Pelosi and the body cams don't work. That's a little bit different. Okay, I wanted to mention one thing that I've seen on Twitter that it goes to show, because this is something that I said in my last video and that I posted on Twitter, is you got to understand the Shanghai crowd is quite unique. There's this video of this lady talking to a police officer that has no weapon, no gun, is just there peacefully talking to them, and they're like, oh, you sold your soul for 20,000 RMB a month. How much is that? 240,000 RMB a year. You sold your soul for that little money. 240,000 RMB a year is not a little money for the vast majority of Chinese people.
I have that much money.
Exactly. So
it just shows you how rich people are in China. To think 20,000 is a shitty little wage. I don't know what a police officer gets, but I know a teacher in Zhongshan probably gets between 6,000 and 10,000 RMB. To be offered 20,000 would be, you'd be up there if you're in Zhongshan. Anyway, Guangzhou would be more, and other places, Shanghai for sure. But I would guess a police officer at 20,000 would be a pretty senior police officer. 20,000 a month. Not now, the guy standing on the street.
The last thing that I wanted to say about these protesting in Shanghai is the disconnect. As we said earlier, and I've said in other videos, the protests in Foxconn, there's a reason for them. They're absolutely valid. There's justification for them. The one in Urumqi, there's absolute justification, calling for changes in the way things are done, calling for investigation, calling for modifications to what's actually taking place.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the ones in Shanghai, it just seems like they're jumping on an opportunity. That's why it feels not organic. It feels like there's a lot of Cantonese writing in some of the messages. There's a lot of coordination in websites and apps that are not used in China. There's something weird there. There's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
strange there. There's a different element that we cannot pinpoint, but we can connect a few dots here and there to say this is worth looking into with more detail and see how things develop and what
For
else
sure.
arises.
Yeah.
Remember, there were photos of CIA officers in Hong Kong with their earpieces, with their radios, giving instruction to some of these youth in Hong Kong. There were photos taken of these people. I'm sure something's going to come up at some point that might illustrate the level of coordination that actually has taken place between
Mhm.
foreign forces and this Chinese youth that's so different from the rest of
Yeah.
China. So
I,
different from the rest of China.
I've noticed that Shanghai is different. What's going on in Guangzhou is also different. There's been Cantonese spoken, and my wife has, because I told her about this, she got a video from one of her cousins about what's going on. And she said, that guy speaking Cantonese, but he's not a Cantonese speaker. He's a Mandarin speaker.
Mm.
He's a foreigner, in fact. He's not even a Mandarin speaker. I mean, you can pick this up. If I hear a German speaking English, I know he's not English. And she's listening to this and said, that guy's not a Cantonese speaker. And I don't think he's even a Chinese speaker. So it's a Chinese person. Now, this is the thing, of course. These could be people who are sleeping inside of China and have been here for a long, long time. They're waiting for this perfect storm to arrive. Now, before we do finish, and I'm going to give you a chance to wrap up, there's one other point I wanted to make about the police, and I had it in the back of my mind. Now, you know, I was a police officer for 10 years in the UK. During that 10 years, I worked on things like the miners' strike. There was a big industrial dispute called Grunwick's industrial dispute. Now, people who study English industrial relations history will know that, and you can find it on Google. It was quite violent, quite aggressive, and I was on the front line of that. The miners' strike was huge. It lasted for over a year, and there was a lot of trouble on that. The Brixton riots were absolutely terrifying. Firebombs, scaffold poles, paving slabs being thrown. And a paving slab in the UK is like 700 by 700. These are not little paving stones. These are slabs being thrown at our shields. It was very dangerous. Lots of police officers ended up in hospital. What I've seen so far, there's 2 points I want to make about the police. One is they have been incredibly restrained, same as Hong Kong. And I will go to the wall against this one. The police are not the antagonizers in this. The police are incredibly restrained. Now, the second point that I wanted to make is that I'm seeing on various different news channels from around the world, they're showing people wearing the full PPE with sticks hitting people. Okay, that's wrong to hit people with sticks, but they're saying these are police officers. These are people who are wearing the same PPE. The police officers who are involved in the security around the lockdown areas are wearing the same PPE as the doctors and the volunteers. Now, if I'm a volunteer and I've got all the PPE on and a bunch of angry, violent, aggressive, even just highly vocal people come running towards me, I'm going to pick up a stick and defend myself. That's the way it is. Now, we don't know, and I think I'd like people to keep an open mind. If you see somebody with a stick working with all the PPE on, don't assume that this is a police officer hitting the crowd. You can assume differently. This could be a volunteer who has been attacked by the crowd, and you're watching it in just out of context, very small moments. So that's the 2 points I wanted to make. The police are very restrained, and not all the people you're seeing hitting someone are police officers.
Thanks, Jerry, for that. I want to share just one last thought for people to understand. After the Big 20, Beijing decided to modify its approach. It's an approach that is going to be a little bit more lax. There were a few points that clearly started to make a difference, but in making a difference, the numbers start to rise. Now, the missive, the mandate from Beijing is okay, let's start to modify this to make people's lives a little bit more easier. The problem with that is the meritocracy that we see here in China that has excellent aspects but could have some negative aspects, and in this case this is one of them. Local leaders are afraid to loosen up because then there's going to be cases in their place and they're afraid to be held responsible for those, as it has been in the past. People who have mismanaged the pandemic are end up being reprimanded or being demoted, etc. So there's a certain a certain contradiction between what Beijing wants to do and what the local leaders want to do. This is why there are measures that go against what Beijing is trying to do, and that is something that needs to be sorted out, oiled up, and made to run smoother, and to get the channel of communication clearer,
Yeah.
and letting people understand that there's a new phase of COVID that we are entering. And one last thing, I heard somebody suggesting that was it you, Jerry, that Xi Jinping should address the nation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it was you.
It
I
was.
personally think that I personally think that giving these protests legitimacy by speaking to the nation is not necessarily the best idea. I think that you wait until these things calm down and then you announce more publicly what was the intention, what took place, what was done, and where do we move on from here. But remember, this isn't about the CPC. This isn't about Xi Jinping. This is about COVID and how people are tired and exhausted from these
Actually,
COVID
it's
measures.
not even about COVID. COVID is being used as the vehicle. COVID is the catalyst. COVID is the thing that has upset so many people. And there are quite rightfully many complaints, just as you've just described there. At the lower level, there are completely different interpretations from the high. And when I say Xi Jinping should, I don't think he should discuss this at all. That's not what I
Mm,
meant at all. What I meant was China has just entered a new wave of COVID. There are currently just in Guangdong alone more than 100,000 new cases. There's probably 250,000 new cases in the last month or so all around China. This is a new wave of COVID. There are lockdowns in different areas. Now, put it into perspective again, these lockdowns are surgical. There is a case in the street behind my apartment. I'm not locked down. Their houses, 3 people live in the house. Their house is locked down. Now, they did some testing locally and they're saying there's no other cases, so we're not locking down. Now, that's what they're doing. My city has 74 cases. That's all, 74 cases. 4 million people live here. They've closed down dine-in restaurants. They've closed all of the KTVs, bars, massage restaurants, all the places where people go and hang around. And so they're closing those. The public park, I have a public park right next to my house, and it's open and people are walking through there. But there's a requirement to wear a mask, which hasn't happened until recently. So this is what's happening, surgical lockdowns. But there are currently 250,000, probably more cases. And that's why I think Xi Jinping needs to address the country. He needs to say, yeah, we've got more cases. This is what we're doing about them. Please bear with us while we do this, and explain how these, I mean, he doesn't have to explain this. Minions can do that. But it can be explained how these lockdowns are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Even today, I edited, in fact, an article that said Haiju, parts of Haiju are reopening public transport tonight at midnight. Haiju is
mm,
the suburb that the entire suburb has been locked down. So public transport is moving back. At the moment, most of Guangzhou is in lockdown, but they're restarting public transport at midnight tonight. What does that tell you? you don't need public transport unless you've got people using it. And that means tomorrow,
Mhm.
more people will be out. That doesn't mean if you're in an area that's controlled, you're not coming out until you've had 3 days of testing with no COVID positive tests. That's how you get out.
There is one person watching us right now that's a dear friend of us who got locked down yesterday. There are several buildings in his community, but just his building got locked down. So that's how surgical this is. All
Yeah.
right, Jerry, thank you
On
so
that
very
note,
much for joining me today. On that
thank
note,
you.
yeah, wishing him a speedy end of quarantine or lockdown. We
You're
want
saying
to
that
say
a get
thank
out
you.
card instead of a get well card.
Exactly. I hope you get out soon. Well, guys, thank you so very much for watching, for liking, commenting, and sharing this. And well, until we see you again, take it easy and bye for now.
Bye, and thank you.